Captain Ilara Kane stood in the bridge of the Eudora, her eyes fixed on the blinking screen in front of her. The ship's AI, Alex, had just picked up an unusual signal, a faint, almost imperceptible pulse coming from the edge of the Sierra system. It wasn't supposed to be there. The star system had been long abandoned, a forgotten corner of the galaxy with no remaining life. Yet the pulse was real, and it was coming from the surface of Sierra's third planet. "Captain, the signal is growing stronger," Alex reported in its calm, steady voice. "It's coming from the planet's surface, below ground level." Ilara raised an eyebrow. She hadn't expected any surprises out here. The Sierra system was nothing more than a historical relic, a place where an ancient race once thrived, only to be wiped out by a mysterious event centuries ago. No one had cared to investigate it since. But this signal, it didn't belong. "Prepare a landing party," she ordered, her voice firm. "I want to know what's down there." A few minutes later, Ilara, accompanied by a small group of skilled crew members, descended to the surface of Sierra in a transport shuttle. The planet was a ghost world, its atmosphere thin and unbreathable. The once vibrant landscape had turned to dust, crumbled ruins scattered like forgotten memories. Set down near the signal's origin, Ilara directed the shuttle pilot. As the shuttle landed gently on the desolate ground, Ilara's team disembarked, scanning the surroundings. The ruins of an ancient city loomed ahead, its towering structures now nothing more than broken shells of their former selves. Once, this place had been full of life, full of hope, and now it stood as a haunting reminder of what had been lost. Ilara led the team into a collapsed building that seemed to be the source of the signal. Inside, it was dark and musty, the air thick with the smell of decay. The walls were etched with strange markings, alien symbols that no one had been able to decipher. The Sierrans, as they were called, had long been a mystery to the galaxy, their sudden disappearance sparking endless debates among historians and scientists. The team moved deeper into the building, their footsteps echoing in the silence. As they approached a sealed chamber at the heart of the ruins, the signal grew stronger. Alex had been right. The source was underground, hidden from sight. "Break through," Ilara ordered. One of the crew members, a skilled engineer, used a high-tech cutting tool to slice through the thick metal door. After a few moments, it fell open with a heavy thud. Inside, they found what they had been searching for. The room was large and circular, with smooth walls made of a material that shimmered faintly in the dim light. In the center of the room, resting on a pedestal, was a small device, a crystalline object that seemed to pulse with energy. And around the pedestal were what looked like the remains of Sierrans. But these were not the mighty, towering beings that Ilara had read about in the old history books. These were fragile, translucent creatures, their bodies barely holding together. They were alive, though. Their minds seemed to reach out to the humans telepathically, a weak, almost desperate presence. Ilara felt a chill run down her spine as she gazed at the alien beings. They were clearly in distress, their once powerful race reduced to these fragile forms, abandoned by the rest of the galaxy. "Captain, these are the last of the Sierrans," one of her crew members whispered, his voice full of awe and sorrow. "How are they still alive?" Another asked. After all these centuries, Ilara knelt down, studying the creatures carefully. They were so weak, so broken, but they were not entirely helpless. She could feel their presence, their thoughts, brushing against her own mind. It wasn't much, just fleeting glimpses, but it was enough. The leader of the Sierrans, a being whose fragile form was barely distinguishable from the others, seemed to sense Ilara's curiosity. It raised one pale arm, and with a gentle gesture, communicated telepathically. "We are the last of our kind. We survived. But no one came to help. All abandoned us." The message was clear, the sadness in the Sierrans' thoughts overwhelming. Ilara stood, her mind racing. She had heard the stories, of course. The Sierrans had once been a powerful race, known throughout the galaxy for their advanced technology and wisdom. But something had gone terribly wrong, and one by one, the galactic civilizations had turned their backs on them. No one had cared enough to offer aid when the Gerans were struck by a bioweapon that left them unable to defend themselves. But now, humanity had found them, and Ilara was faced with a choice: leave them here to fade away, or help them rebuild their world. "We won't abandon you," she said softly, her voice filled with determination. The Gerans responded with a weak but grateful thought, their minds brushing against hers once again. "You are different. You will protect us." "Yes," Ilara confirmed. "We will protect you." As Ilara turned to leave the ruins, a sense of purpose settled within her. This was only the beginning. The Eudora was about to change the fate of an entire race, and she would not let their legacy be erased. Ilara Kane stood at the command deck of the Eudora, staring out into the vastness of space. The soft hum of the ship's engines filled the room, a steady rhythm that seemed to match the thumping of her own heart. She couldn't shake the memory of the Xerans, their fragile bodies, their desperate thoughts. She had promised to protect them, and now she had to figure out how to make good on that promise. The Eudora was on course to return to the nearest human colony station, but Ilara had a sinking feeling in her chest. The galaxy had long turned its back on the Xerans, and the Galactic Council wasn't going to take kindly to the fact that humanity had decided to offer them sanctuary. "Alex, open a channel to the Galactic Council," Ilara ordered, her voice calm but firm. The ship's AI responded almost immediately. "Channel open, Captain." Ilara's fingers hovered over the console, her mind racing. She had been in enough tense negotiations to know that this wasn't going to be easy. The Council had always been about keeping things orderly, maintaining balance, and following the rules. Helping the Xerans was the opposite of that. It was a risk, one that could upset everything. The face of Councillor Veros appeared on the screen. He was a tall, serious-looking man, his sharp features illuminated by the soft glow of his terminal. His eyes narrowed as he studied Ilara. "Ilara Kane," he said in a stern voice, "I trust you have a good reason for contacting us. You are aware that the Xeran species was declared non-viable by the Council long ago. Their extinction was inevitable." Ilara took a deep breath. She had expected this, but it didn't make it any easier to hear. "I found survivors, Counselor. Not just survivors, but beings who still hold incredible knowledge that could help the galaxy. They've been abandoned by every civilization, and I can't stand by while that happens." Vero's expression didn't change. "Captain Kane, you are aware of the risks. The Xerans were destroyed by a bioweapon, and their presence now could lead to dangerous consequences. We cannot afford to have them." "They're not a threat," Ilara cut in, her voice rising just slightly. "The Xerans are weak, but they still have knowledge that could change everything. Technology that could benefit the entire galaxy if we help them rebuild." Vero's expression softened, but only for a moment. "And how do you propose to help them?" "The resources required to rehabilitate an entire species would be vast. You'll need the Council's approval for any major operations." Ilara nodded. She had expected this too. The Council would never simply approve something like this without a thorough investigation. They would want a detailed plan, a set of guarantees. But Ilara wasn't asking for their approval. Not yet, anyway. "I'm not asking for permission," she said quietly. "I'm telling you that this is happening, whether you approve it or not. I'm bringing them back to our colonies, and we're going to help them." Veros was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on Ilara. She could see the conflict in his eyes. He didn't want to be the one to risk everything on a decision that went against the Council's orders, but there was something about Ilara's conviction that made him hesitate. "You're gambling with humanity's future," he finally said, his voice tinged with frustration. "You're risking everything for a race that might not even be capable of returning to their former glory. If you're wrong, the consequences could be catastrophic." "I know the risks," Ilara said, her voice steady, "but I can't ignore them. They deserve a chance." Veros sighed heavily, his fingers tapping on the edge of his desk. "You're walking a fine line, Captain. The Council will not tolerate disobedience. If you continue down this path, you'll be on your own." Ilara didn't flinch. She had already made up her mind. "I'm prepared for that." With that, Veros's image blinked off, and Ilara was left in silence. The room felt colder somehow, the weight of her decision pressing down on her. She knew that going against the Council's wishes meant facing isolation. She would have to fight for every step forward, with no guarantee that anyone would stand by her. But there was no turning back now. The Gerans were depending on her, and she would do whatever it took to help them. "Ilara, we've received a transmission from the other colonies." Alex's voice broke through the silence. "They're asking for confirmation of the Gerans' condition and your plans moving forward." Ilara's stomach tightened. She knew that once the news got out, the pressure would only increase. The galaxy had long decided the fate of the Gerans, and now humanity had gone and thrown that all into question. It wasn't just the Galactic Council she had to worry about. It was every other species who had written the Gerans off as nothing more than a failed chapter in galactic history. But none of that mattered. Humanity had always been defined by its ability to make difficult choices, to stand up for what was right, even when the rest of the galaxy would turn away. The Gerans had been forgotten for too long. It was time for humanity to remind the universe that sometimes it was worth protecting the forgotten. "We'll handle it, Alex," Ilara said, her voice resolute. "Prepare the ship for a return to the colonies. It's time to make our case." The Eudora had only just entered the orbit of the closest human colony station when the first warning shot was fired. Ilara Kane, standing at the ship's command deck, felt the tremor in the hull before she heard the alarm blare through the loudspeakers. The sudden jolt wasn't from a natural source. It was the unmistakable energy signature of a weapons strike. "Captain," Alex's calm voice came through the intercom. "We've been targeted. Unknown ships approaching fast." Ilara's heart skipped a beat. She had expected resistance from the Galactic Council, but not this. Her fingers flew across the console, calling up the ship's sensors. On the view screen, a dozen sleek, black ships emerged from behind the colony station. Their design was unmistakable. Arkan Collective vessels, a powerful military faction with vast influence across the galaxy. Their presence here could only mean one thing. They knew about the Gerans. "This is Captain Ilara Kane of the Eudora," she said, her voice steady as she spoke into the comms. "We are not a threat. We are here to assist the Gerans." A voice crackled through the comms, cutting her off. "Captain Kane, this is Commander Varric of the Arkan Collective. You are in violation of intergalactic peace treaties by harboring the Gerans. Surrender them to us immediately, or face the consequences." Ilara's mind raced. The Gerans had long been abandoned, their plight ignored by every major power, including the Arkans. Now, out of nowhere, they were being pursued. The message was clear. The Arkans wanted the Gerans erased, and they weren't interested in negotiation. "We will not surrender the Gerans," Ilara said firmly, though she could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. "They are under our protection now, and we will defend them." Commander Varric's voice was sharp, laced with anger. "Then you will face the full might of the Arkan Collective, Captain. You are choosing the wrong side." The communication cut off abruptly, and the view screen blinked with an incoming transmission. This time, from a smaller vessel that had detached from the Arkan fleet. The ship was not as sleek as the others, but bristled with weaponry. "Ready the shields," Ilara commanded. Her hands gripped the console as the ship rocked again, a warning shot narrowly missing the Eudora. "Alex, power up the weapons. We're not running from this fight." "Understood, Captain," Alex responded, its tone unwavering. "Shields at full strength. Weapons are online." The Eudora wasn't designed for long-range combat, but it had been equipped with enough firepower to make it a formidable opponent when necessary. Ilara wasn't sure how much good that would do against the Arkan's superior fleet, but she wasn't about to back down. Not now. Not after everything they had fought for. Varric's voice came through the comms once more, this time with a cold, mocking edge. "You are outmatched, Captain. Your resistance will be crushed." Without warning, the enemy fleet opened fire, their weapons streaking toward the Eudora like a shower of bright sparks. The ship shook under the impact, but Ilara held her ground, her fingers flying across the controls, guiding the ship to weave between the blasts. "Return fire," she ordered. The Eudora's cannons hummed to life, and a barrage of laser fire shot back at the enemy ships. The Archons retaliated quickly, their shields absorbing the strikes with ease. The situation was quickly escalating into a deadly confrontation, one Ilara hadn't wanted but was now forced into. "We can't keep this up for long," Alex warned. "Their ships are too powerful. We need a way to escape." "Escape is not an option," Ilara snapped, determination in her voice. "We have to hold them off." "Do what you can, Alex." As the battle raged on, Ilara's mind raced. She had to buy enough time for the Zerans to escape the station. The last thing she wanted was for them to be caught in the middle of a galactic conflict that wasn't their fight. "Prepare the escape pods," Ilara ordered. "I want the Zerans safely on board before this gets worse. We'll need to relocate them to a secure location." A series of confirmations flashed on the screen, but Ilara could feel the weight of the situation pressing on her chest. Every second counted. The Eudora was a sitting target in the midst of the Archon fleet, and if they couldn't find a way to break free, the Zerans would be lost. "Captain," one of the crew members shouted, pointing at the sensors. "There's a breach in their formation. An opening." Ilara's eyes snapped to the screen. The Archons, confident in their overwhelming power, had left a gap in their defensive line. This was their chance. "Take us through," Ilara barked, her voice filled with urgency. The Eudora shot forward, using its smaller size and faster maneuverability to slip between the massive Archon ships. The enemy fleet reacted immediately, but it was too late. The Eudora broke free, rocketing toward the distant edge of the colony's orbit. "We're free," Ilara said, a sigh of relief escaping her lips, but she knew it wasn't over. The Archons would regroup, and they would be back, angrier than ever. "Alex, send a distress signal to the nearest human fleet. We need reinforcements." But the real battle wasn't about ships or weapons. It was about the Zerans. Ilara's resolve hardened. She had taken the first step. Now she would fight until the end, no matter who stood in her way. The Eudora had escaped the immediate danger, but Ilara Kane knew it was only a matter of time before the Archon fleet regrouped. They would come after them again. And next time, the battle might not end in their favor. But for now, the ship was safe, and so were the Zerans. Ilara paced the command deck, her mind racing. The distress signal had been sent, and reinforcements were on their way. But that could take days. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. The Zerans held the key to everything. And she needed to learn more about their past, about what had truly happened to them. "Alex, is the Zeran archive accessible yet?" Ilara asked. The ship's AI responded with its usual calm tone. "The data from the Zeran survivors is being processed, Captain. The archives are locked behind a series of protective barriers. It will take some time to decode the full contents." Ilara frowned. "How long?" "Estimating 2 hours, Captain," Alex replied. "It seems the archives were designed to prevent unauthorized access." Ilara nodded. She had expected some level of security. The Zerans were a highly intelligent species, after all. But if their knowledge was locked away for a reason, she had to wonder why no one had tried to break the encryption before. As the hours passed, Ilara found herself drawn to the Zeran survivors. The small, fragile beings were housed in a safe section of the ship, and though their minds were weak, they still communicated telepathically, offering fragments of their history. Ilara had learned a lot from their brief thoughts about their lost cities, their advanced technology, and their peaceful ways of life before the war. But there were still so many questions. Why had the Zerans been abandoned? Why had the Arkan Collective decided to wipe them out? And most importantly, what was the secret they carried with them? Finally, the alarm signaled that the archives had been decrypted. Ilara wasted no time. She quickly made her way to the data terminal, where the information from the Ziran archives was being displayed. The screen flickered to life, showing an ancient holographic map of the galaxy. Ilara zoomed in on a section near the outer rim, where Ziera had once been located. The map was dotted with symbols, representing different civilizations, alliances, and technologies. But one symbol stood out, an ancient device, unlike anything Ilara had seen before. It was marked as the core. A message flashed across the screen, written in the same alien script that adorned the ruins of Ziera. Alex quickly translated it. The core is the key to our downfall. It is the source of unimaginable power, and it cannot fall into the wrong hands. Ilara's heart skipped a beat. This was the truth she had been searching for. The Zirans had been destroyed not because of their own mistakes, but because of something far darker. The core wasn't just a weapon. It was a power source that could change the balance of the entire galaxy. The Arkan Collective. Ilara murmured to herself. They didn't just want to eliminate the Zirans. They wanted the core. The data continued to unfold, revealing more details about the core and its potential. The Zirans had created the device long ago, using their advanced knowledge of energy manipulation, but it had been too powerful, even for them. The core had the ability to harness and release energy on a scale that could either save or destroy entire worlds. But something had gone wrong. According to the archives, the core had been corrupted during the final stages of its development. The Zirans had attempted to destroy it, but the device had gone rogue, unleashing a catastrophic energy surge that devastated their planet and left them on the brink of extinction. The Arkan Collective, seeing the potential of the core, had orchestrated a covert attack. They had unleashed the bioweapon that crippled the Zirans, ensuring that they couldn't defend themselves long enough to protect the core. Afterward, the Arkans had swept in, taking control of the core's remains and hiding the truth from the rest of the galaxy. Ilara's hands trembled as she absorbed the full scope of what she had learned. The Zirans had been victims, not only of their own creation, but of a greater conspiracy. The Arkan Collective had killed millions for the power contained within the core, and now, that power was lost to history. But not entirely. Ilara. Alex's voice interrupted her thoughts. There's one more piece of information. The core's location. It's hidden, but it's not far from here. Ilara's pulse quickened. The core was still out there, waiting to be found. If the Arkans got their hands on it, the consequences could be catastrophic. The galaxy could be plunged into chaos. We have to find it first, Ilara said, her voice filled with determination. Before the Arkans do. But the mission was far from simple. The core wasn't just hidden. It was protected by layers of defenses that would make it nearly impossible to access without triggering catastrophic consequences. Prepare the team, Ilara said. We're going after the core. The fate of the galaxy rested in their hands, and Ilara knew that this mission would define not only the future of humanity, but the future of every species in the galaxy. It was a dangerous path, but there was no turning back now. The Eudora sped through the dark void of space, heading toward the last known coordinates of the core. Ilara Kane stood at the command deck, her eyes scanning the stars, her thoughts racing. The stakes had never been higher. She had learned the truth. The Zirans' fall was no accident, but part of a darker plot by the Arkan Collective. The core, the very thing the Arkans had sought to control, could reshape the galaxy. In the wrong hands, it could lead to destruction. Ilara. Alex's voice broke through her thoughts. We are approaching the designated coordinates. The anomaly is ahead. Ilara's gaze shifted to the view screen, where the faint glow of an unknown object began to materialize in the distance. A distortion in space, like a faint ripple, disrupted the stars around it. The core's location was hidden behind a veil of energy, exactly as the Ziran's archives had described. "It's there," Ilara said, her voice quiet but filled with resolve. "We have to get closer. Prepare to enter the anomaly." Alex processed the command. "Warning, Captain. The energy levels within the anomaly are fluctuating. Any wrong move could destabilize the ship." Ilara didn't hesitate. She had faced danger before, but this was different. This was the key to saving, or destroying, the future of the galaxy. "We're not turning back," Ilara said firmly. "Bring us in slowly. We'll navigate this carefully." The ship's engines hummed to life as the Eudora edged closer to the anomaly. The rippling energy around them seemed almost alive, vibrating with untapped power. For a moment, Ilara felt the weight of the galaxy's future pressing down on her shoulders. The core had to be protected. If the Archons found it first, nothing would stop them from using it to dominate every civilization in their path. A crackling sound echoed through the command deck as the ship passed through the energy field, and the stars outside seemed to distort into streaks of light. The Eudora jolted, but the ship held together. The anomaly was like a hidden pocket in space, untouched by the rest of the universe. There was nothing but darkness and a sense of eerie quiet. "Ilara, I'm detecting a structure," Alex said. "It's massive, very deep within the anomaly." The view screen flickered, revealing a faint outline of something large, built into the very fabric of the anomaly. The structure was unlike anything Ilara had ever seen, ancient, yet clearly advanced. Towers of jagged metal seemed to pierce through the anomaly's energy field, and massive doors lay open, waiting to be entered. "This is it," Ilara whispered to herself. She steeled her nerves. The core wasn't just a weapon, it was the heart of the Ziran downfall, and they had to find it before anyone else could. The Eudora approached the structure, and Ilara could feel her pulse quicken. They were entering a place lost to time, a forgotten relic of the past, and yet it felt alive with potential. She had no idea what challenges lay ahead, but there was no turning back. "Prepare landing gear," Ilara ordered. "We're going in." The Eudora slowly descended toward the surface of the massive structure, its landing thrusters keeping it steady. As the ship touched down with a soft thud, Ilara's heart raced. The doors of the structure ahead were massive, towering over them like the gates to an ancient city. "We've arrived," Ilara said, turning to her crew. "Everyone, gear up. We'll go in together. Keep your focus, and remember why we're here." The crew moved quickly, donning their suits and securing their weapons. Ilara led the way, stepping out onto the surface of the structure. The air was thin, and the atmosphere was unlike anything they had experienced before. The walls of the structure were covered in strange symbols, like a language lost to time. But the path ahead was clear, an entrance that seemed to beckon them forward. "Ilara," Alex's voice crackled in her earpiece, "I'm detecting a power source inside. It's unlike anything we've encountered. Be cautious." The team proceeded cautiously, their footsteps echoing in the silent corridors. The deeper they went into the structure, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The walls seemed to pulse with energy, and the temperature fluctuated. It was as if the place was alive, watching them as they moved. The corridors twisted and turned, leading them into a vast chamber. In the center of the room, surrounded by ancient, glowing symbols, stood the core. It was a massive, crystalline structure, radiating energy that made the very air hum with power. Its surface shimmered with colors that defied description, like a living thing, pulsing with a rhythm all its own. Ilara's breath caught in her throat as she approached it. The core was beautiful, dangerous, and full of potential, but there was no time to admire its design. The Archons would be coming soon. "We need to secure the core," Ilara said, her voice firm. "Alex, find a way to stabilize it. We can't let it fall into the wrong hands." As Alex processed the data, the team spread out, securing the room. But just as Ilara reached the core, the ground beneath them trembled. The faint sound of engines hummed in the distance. "They're here," Ilara said, turning to her team. "Get ready. The Archons are closing in." The room seemed to come alive, the core flashing with brighter energy as if reacting to the incoming threat. Time was running out, and the true test was about to begin. The air in the chamber grew heavy with tension. The core, glowing brightly in the center of the room, hummed with power. Ilara Kane could feel it in her bones. The core was more than just an ancient relic. It was alive with energy, pulsating in rhythm with the very fabric of space, and it was about to change everything. "They're getting closer," Alex's voice echoed through Ilara's earpiece. "We don't have much time." Ilara nodded, her eyes scanning the room. The Archons were on their way, and she knew that once they arrived, they would stop at nothing to claim the core. The Eudora had already faced their fleet once, and they had barely escaped. There would be no second chances. "We need to protect the core at all costs," Ilara said, her voice steady despite the storm of thoughts racing through her mind. "Alex, is there any way to stabilize it? Any way to prevent the Archons from activating it?" Alex's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. "I'm working on it, Captain. The core is designed to react to outside forces. It can be dangerous if triggered incorrectly. I'm attempting to access its central system, but it will take time." "Time we don't have," Ilara said, turning to her team. "We need to prepare for the worst. Get into position." The crew moved quickly, securing weapons and setting up defenses around the core. Ilara stood at the center, her eyes never leaving the pulsing crystal that was at the heart of this mission. It was beautiful, but it was also the key to everything, the power to reshape the galaxy. And now, it was theirs to protect. As the crew prepared for battle, Ilara's mind raced. She had learned so much in the past few days. The Archons had tried to erase the Zirans, not because they were a threat, but because they had the secret to the core's power. The Zirans had built it, and in the wrong hands, it could become the most destructive weapon in the universe. The ground beneath them trembled again. This time, it was stronger, a sign that the Archon fleet had arrived. Ilara's heart raced. She could feel the weight of the moment. They were on the brink of something far greater than themselves. The Archons would not give up easily, and Ilara was prepared to fight with everything she had. "They're here," a crew member said, pointing to the view screen. A fleet of Archon ships appeared at the edge of the structure, their dark shapes looming in the distance. They were closing in fast. Ilara took a deep breath, her hand steady on her weapon. She had been in battles before, but this was different. The core wasn't just a prize. It was a weapon of unimaginable power. And if the Archons took it, there would be no stopping them. "Ready yourselves," Ilara said. "This will be our toughest fight yet." The crew took their positions, each of them ready to protect the core with their lives. The Eudora's crew had faced enemies before, but they had never faced the Archon Collective, an empire built on strength, ruthless and cold. Ilara knew this battle would be a test of their resolve, their loyalty, and their ability to stand together. Just as the first Archon ship entered the structure, the ground shook violently. The core reacted, its glow intensifying as the energy around it began to shift. It was as if the core itself sensed the incoming threat. The symbols on the walls around them glowed brighter, and the air crackled with static energy. "Captain," Alex called out, a note of alarm in its voice. "The core is reacting. It's unstable. The Archons are triggering something." The team readied their weapons. Ilara's grip tightened on her blaster. The Archons were trying to take control of the core's power, and they didn't care what it took to achieve that. "We can't let them," Ilara said, her voice firm. "Stand your ground, everyone. We protect this core, no matter what." The first wave of Archon soldiers stormed into the chamber, their black armor gleaming under the flickering light. They moved quickly, their weapons raised, but they hadn't expected resistance. Ilara's team fought with precision, their training kicking in as they engaged the Archon forces. Blasts of energy filled the room, and the sound of weapons firing echoed off the walls. Ilara fought with everything she had, dodging and weaving as she fired back at the invaders. The Archons were powerful, but they hadn't counted on the determination of Ilara and her crew. She had seen humanity face impossible odds before, and every time, they had fought back stronger. The battle raged on, each side vying for control of the core. The energy in the room surged, reacting to the chaos. Ilara could feel the tension in the air, as if the core was alive, watching, waiting. "We can't hold them off forever," one of her crew members called out, dodging a blast. "We don't have to," Ilara said, her voice steady. "Elix, is the stabilization process complete?" "I'm almost there, Captain," Elix responded. "Just a little longer." The Archons were relentless. For every soldier Ilara's crew took down, 2 more took their place. The core's energy continued to grow, making the room even more volatile. Ilara knew they had to act fast. The core wasn't just a weapon. It was the key to saving the Zirans, to stopping the Archons from conquering the galaxy. Ilara would protect it with her life, no matter the cost. "Elix," Ilara called, her voice urgent. "Now. Stabilize it now." With a final surge of energy, the core reacted. The room erupted with light as the crystal pulsed with power. The Archons hesitated, just for a moment. But it was enough. The force of the energy disrupted their advance, sending them reeling. Ilara took the opportunity. "Push them back," she shouted. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time, Ilara could feel a shift. The core was on their side, and with it, they had a fighting chance. The battle had raged for what felt like hours. Ilara Kane's crew had fought fiercely, holding their ground against the relentless Archon forces. But the Archons, with their superior numbers and advanced technology, were closing in. The core pulsed with energy, but it was clear that they couldn't keep this up forever. Ilara knew that if they didn't find a way to stabilize the core permanently, the Archons would overpower them. "Elix," Ilara shouted, her voice filled with urgency. "How much longer until the core is fully stabilized?" "I'm almost there, Captain," Elix replied. "The process is nearly complete. But the energy is unstable. If we don't secure it soon, it will destabilize the entire structure." Ilara gritted her teeth. She had expected the core to be difficult to control, but the level of danger was more than she had anticipated. The core's power was beyond anything they had ever faced, and it seemed as though it was growing stronger with every passing second. It was both a gift and a curse, and they were running out of time. "We can't afford to wait any longer," Ilara said, her voice filled with determination. "We need to force the Archons back, or this will all be for nothing." The room trembled as the Archons pushed forward, their weapons blazing. The walls cracked, and the floor shook beneath them. The core's energy, now fully awakened, responded to the chaos, its light growing brighter and more erratic. "Ilara, we need to go now," one of her crew members, Jarek, called out, pulling her arm. "We can't hold them off forever." Ilara's mind raced. They had to buy enough time for Elix to complete the stabilization. But it was clear that they were outnumbered. The Archons would stop at nothing to claim the core, and without it, the galaxy could fall into their hands. "All right," Ilara said, her voice filled with resolve. "We'll make our stand here. Hold the line, no matter what." With a quick nod, she and her crew moved into position, their weapons raised, ready for the final confrontation. The Archons were advancing, their footsteps heavy on the ground, their faces hidden behind dark helmets. They were a cold, calculating force, but Ilara knew that humanity had something the Archons lacked: heart. The first wave of Archons stormed into the chamber, their weapons aimed at Ilara's crew. The fight erupted in an explosion of blaster fire. Ilara dove behind a pillar, narrowly avoiding a blast that would have struck her. She fired back, her shots hitting their targets with precision. Her crew fought with the same intensity, their resolve unshakable. But despite their efforts, the Archons kept coming. For every soldier Ilara's team took down, 2 more took their place. The room was becoming a war zone, filled with smoke and debris. The core's power continued to surge, casting an eerie glow over the chaos. "Ilara!" Jurek yelled, ducking behind cover. "The core's energy is reaching critical levels. We need to get out of here." "No," Ilara said firmly. "We can't leave. Not now. Not after everything we've fought for." Her eyes locked onto the glowing core. They were so close to completing their mission. If Alex could stabilize the core, they could turn the tide of the battle. But if they failed, everything would be lost. Another wave of Archons charged forward, and Ilara's team met them head-on. The blaster fire was deafening as both sides clashed, the ground shaking with each strike. Ilara's heart pounded in her chest, but her focus remained sharp. She couldn't afford to lose. Not now. Just as the Archons were beginning to gain ground, Alex's voice echoed in Ilara's earpiece. "Ilara, the core is stabilized. The energy field is now under control. You've done it. The Archons can't access its power anymore." Ilara's breath caught in her throat. It was done. They had succeeded. "Everyone, fall back," Ilara shouted, signaling to her crew. "We've secured the core. Let's go." With renewed hope, the crew made their way toward the exit. The Archons, realizing that the core was no longer within their reach, hesitated. It was too late for them to change their strategy. Ilara's team moved swiftly, pushing through the remaining Archons, forcing them to retreat. As they reached the ship, the Eudora's engines roared to life, ready to take off. The crew scrambled aboard, their hearts still racing from the battle. Ilara gave the order to launch, and the ship soared into the sky, leaving the war-torn structure behind. As the Eudora flew into the stars, Ilara stood at the command deck, staring out at the vastness of space. The battle was over, but the fight was far from finished. The core was safe, for now. But Ilara knew the Archons would never give up. They would come again. And when they did, humanity would be ready. "The core is ours to protect," Ilara said quietly, her voice filled with resolve. "And we will make sure it is never used for destruction." The fate of the galaxy had shifted. The Archons had lost, but their desire for the core remained. The crew of the Eudora had won this battle, but the war was far from over. Humanity had proven, once again, that it would stand against the darkness, no matter the cost. And in the silence of space, Ilara knew that the fight for the future had only just begun.